He was actually converting people from the left to the right, person by person. Just looking at his past week in covering him yesterday, it's like he was at Oxford not long ago. He was in Japan on Sunday. He was in Utah, as we know, yesterday. He was launching a tour at which we were debating with him whether we'd go to Utah or Indiana in the next couple of weeks. We wound up going to Virginia with him. And it's like there was no stopping him. He honed his communication skills to absolute perfection. And he did it by using them not just with people who agree with him, but more importantly, with people who don't, with an open heart and an open mind. They unfairly demonized him so many times, but one of the things we all loved about him was Charlie was a happy warrior. Charlie was kind, he was warm, he was giving. He did not look with disdain upon you if you showed up and you disagreed with him, or even if you insulted him. He actually might laugh a little, like if you insulted him or took a shot at him. And that was like the key to his magic. That was the key to getting these young people to actually listen to him. And one of the things I've noticed in the past 24 hours is that he not only had such an importance to those of us who are on the political right, but to our kids. My son, my daughter too, he was in their algorithms. They were extremely jarred by this news. They're 14 and 15, Mark. I mean, he was speaking to a younger generation of kids who were apolitical and explaining to them these issues that they hear their parents debate or they hear kicked around in the news in a way that they could understand and access. And I know, for example, at my son's school today, they were going to plant the number of flags of those we lost on 9/11 around the college campus, around the high school campus, and they just added one more for Charlie. I mean, that's how much he meant, not just to us, but to the youth of America. And I'll also say young men in particular.
Yeah. President Trump announced he's going to be awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously. You and I both have heard overnight from people who didn't know that their kids were so close to Charlie. I'm sure you have too. At least I have. And none of that surprises me because I've been hearing it for years from folks saying my kids aren't interested in politics. Gavin Newsom said it when he interviewed Charlie, that his kid was so excited. And as you said, probably more men than women, but Charlie was not blind to that. He and I talked on Tuesday about this new NBC poll that showed the disparity in support for President Trump and his policies between men and women. And of course, typical Charlie, he was saying, great on the men, on the males, but what can we do about the females? What are proper ways you've thought of or can think of to honor Charlie, to not to make concrete this notion that we cannot let his work die with him? What are things you think the country can do or the president can do besides awarding him this high honor?
I mean, there's a big difference there between what the rest of us can do and what Trump can do. But for the rest of us, we have to follow his example. We have to say all the things that we know are true and right, no matter what the consequences in terms of name calling or bad grades or even professional consequences. We have to say what's true, what we know is true. He considered his mission on this earth to fight evil and speak truth. What better way is there to honor him than to do more of that? And especially now that the threat environment feels greater and more acute, that's the time it's even more important to speak the truth and fight evil. And that means we're going to need a revolution on college campuses that is driven by the acolytes of Charlie Kirk. We're going to need every conservative or conservative leaning person on every college campus across this country to speak their minds, to not remain quiet in the moments where the liberals are dominating the conversation and telling us the things we know are untrue, like a man can become a woman, the race dividing that we've seen since 2020, at least. Of course, it was before as well. You must speak up. If you don't, they've won. Charlie's not here to lead it anymore. You're going to have to lead it yourselves. You're going to have to show up. You're going to have to form a Young Republicans Club or a Turning Point chapter, which will go on. And you're going to have to say all the things, including to the professors and to your colleagues. And that goes for those of us who are out of college as well. That's the only way I can think of to honor his legacy. With respect to Trump, we have to see. We need to know who the shooter was, and we need to know specifically the ideology that was behind it. Already there are reports out today that are compelling. I'm sure you saw the Steven Crowder report.
Yeah.
And Steven Crowder's got a very solid record. I cover him and follow him extensively. Steven's had very solid law enforcement leaks for years now. I trust him implicitly on this. And not only was his leak from the ATF and an alleged document on the shooter put out there by somebody who I trust, but it was confirmed. Let's say there are 10 details in there, 8 of them were just confirmed by the FBI at the presser.
Right.
The ones that were not mentioned were the allegations in the ATF report about what was allegedly written on the 3 unspent cartridges in the gun, which spoke to a specific ideology. No one asked about it because no one there would follow Steven Crowder. Now, would they? Their loss. So we'll find out shortly whether the ideology is as the bullets reportedly convey, and that'll give us some framework for what to do. But Trump, just one other point, Mark. Trump, there is something that Trump can do. Okay, so if it is a politically motivated, targeted assassination based on politics, then we actually are going to have to take a look at the people who are behind the ideology that pushed it, and what has everyone been saying on that front? What has been the messaging? Because it is fair game to look at it. And then those people must be held to account. And those people must reflect on how they've talked about Charlie Kirk and frankly, others like him who have those similar messages. So we'll get there when we get there. But in the wake of this young girl's murder on this train in North Carolina, the shooting of young Christian children in Minneapolis, there actually is something else Trump can do. Trump needs to not only open the doors again to institutionalization, as he's doing with his cleanup of the homeless encampments in city after city. He needs to create the facilities that can house them. And I don't mean an apartment complex run by leftists. I mean a lockup facility that is humane, to which a loving mother would send her son. Like we saw in the case of the Charlotte, North Carolina shooter. She had no place to send him, and she knew he was dangerous. And I don't know what this person's ideology is going to be behind Charlie, but we've seen in the Minneapolis shooting as well, someone who was sick, and it was obvious to people around them. And the writings proved it, and the person's behavior had grown progressively bizarre. And what we see in 99% of these shootings is the people around them had no place to send them. They didn't know what to do. The law enforcement system can't handle them unless and until they've committed a crime. The psychiatric system won't handle them. They can't talk someone out of psychosis or sociopathy, and most won't even try. Now, yes, schizophrenia, sure, there's medication, but they give you a prescription. If you take it, it's up to you. We need to be more flexible and open-minded to involuntary institutionalization, just as most countries in the West already are. We are the extreme outliers on this in not allowing it because of our First Amendment, because of the Bill of Rights. Well, you know what? Our civil liberties matter too, the civil liberties of law-abiding people, and those need to be front and center.
Yeah, I mean, given how aggressive the president has been on anything that matters to him, and we know this matters to him, I think you'll see once at a place and time of his choosing, his advisors choosing, and the vice president, of course, will be heavily involved because of his relationship. I think you'll see more than just this rewarding of a medal. I think you'll see pretty substantial action. I want to ask you about Charlie. One of my disappointments, not a surprise, but disappointments, is that people in what I call the dominant media, they don't understand who he was or what he was about. And so the coverage is very superficial. They call him right-wing activist and things like that.
Or far right. Far right.
Yeah. Far right wing. He's such a talented guy. And I spent a lot of my time when I talked to him asking about that as a journalist, so interested in how someone without family connections at such a young age had achieved so much. So what are some traits of his that you think allowed him to achieve so very much in so many different realms at 31?
I think first and foremost, Mark, he really felt like he was God's messenger. I really think he felt he was driven by God, that he was mission driven, and that it was a divine mission. And that's what gave him all of his inspiration. He was so tireless in his pursuits. There was never a point at which he said, it's good enough. You know, it wasn't about money for him. All the money that Turning Point was making, he was putting back into the organization. Charlie didn't have some desire to live large and have this huge, expensive life. He wanted to change the country for the better. And that's why he knew, you know, one of the things I noticed yesterday and going back over some of our own interviews and some of Charlie's clips, he knew he was under threat. in some of the interviews he gave, he talked about the death threats that he got. He talked about how well armed he was, what a good security team he had. But, you know, in a way, notwithstanding all that, Mark, he was too trusting. He was too trusting because he was exposed in a way he shouldn't have been at that event. You know, the rooftop shooter was obviously a foreseeable risk given what happened to Trump the summer before. And I think Charlie's security team just didn't envision it as being a realistic possibility for him. In any event, my point is simply he was courageous. He knew that there was a threat and he continued out there anyway. And his wife, Erica, too, continued out there anyway. He said repeatedly he felt that he had a mission to fight evil and speak truth. And that's what he did. He didn't care who was across from him. And I spoke to him after many of these media-generated controversies on my show and on his. And he would thank me for defending him because the defenses were so few and far between. You know, even some on the right, Mark, to my great lamentation, would rip on Charlie and didn't like Charlie because they thought he was MAGA, you know, the more establishment right, you know, the right of yesteryear, not Trump's MAGA right. And they diminished him. They would jump on the controversies. They would see him as somebody with whom you wouldn't want to be associated, you know, not in polite company. He only got asked back onto Fox within the past 4 months. He was banned at Fox for most of his tenure building Turning Point. They didn't want anything to do with him. So I just, for those people, I have a level of anger today. I forgive them, but I'm coming off a level of anger because he wasn't what they said. They needed to get past the fact that they had this image of the guy and try to actually listen to him, because I also share in the belief that he was a messenger from God. He was speaking true sense and saying all the hardest things and saying them really bravely. And for me, that's what I hope his legacy will be.
Yeah, and you alluded to this several times as a happy warrior, the opposite of a hater. It confounds me even today in the wake of his death, people saying, you know, he spewed hatred. This guy had a pure heart. It was so kind, and you can't find anybody who dealt with him and knew his heart, who wasn't in awe of just what a kind person he was.
It's such a bastardization by the left. And in the past, whatever it's been, 18 hours, I've had zero appetite to look at what they're saying about him. Like I'm having a really difficult time caring. And that's unlike me. You know, usually on these stories, I definitely look at what the left is saying, and then I usually mock them on my show, and it's somewhat cathartic. But I'm just not there at all. I just feel like they can go fuck themselves. I couldn't give two shits about what they think of Charlie Kirk. They didn't know him. They don't understand any of us. And it's because of willful blindness. They choose to demonize rather than seek to understand. So fuck them. I just feel like we know who he was. We understand his legacy. We will live up to it. We will continue his mission. We will shove it down their throats with every show and column that we have, and we will do it relentlessly. If they think they've gotten less of Charlie Kirk, they're going to get more. I'm telling you, these are disciples of his on these college campuses who now are going to find the strength to rise up against the nonsense. And people like me, like you, like Ben Shapiro, all of us who have been in these trenches for quite some time only feel emboldened, not cowed, emboldened to say all of the things and say them even more forcefully and to work on being even more compelling and even more energetic so we can say them in more places to more faces and persuade more millions over to our side. They've done exactly what they didn't want to do. And the one thing they haven't done is to silence Charlie's message, though they've succeeded in silencing him.
Attention, folks, 64 years or older. This is important. The Department of Justice recently sued 3 major Medicare brokers for claiming they were unbiased while allegedly pushing people into plans that got them the biggest kickbacks. It's true, most insurance agents cannot be trusted, and you can't rely on government resources either. That's why I want you to know about a place called Chapter. Chapter was started by people who went through this personally in their own families after their parents were pushed into the wrong Medicare plans by an agent who was more focused on commissions than on good care. Chapter's mission is very simple: to give every American the honest, straightforward Medicare advice that they need and that they deserve. And here's what makes them different. They're the only Medicare advisor that compares every plan nationwide, not just a few. That saves their clients an average of $1,100 every year. There's no reason not to call. It's quick, it's easy, and they can review your options in less than 20 minutes. If you're already in the good right plan for you, they'll tell you. But if there's a better one, they'll help you switch. This could be the most important call you make this year. Dial pound 250 and say Chapter Medicare to get the peace of mind you deserve. Again, that's pound 250 250 and say Chapter Medicare.